Hello, everyone. Sam here, and we gotta talk about the Sifan mysteries. This is the next episode of the Sorcery of Sax Rohmer. My review show focused on talking about the works of Sax Rohmer, the British thriller author. And the Sifan mysteries, in case the title of this collection is and didn't clue you in, was a Fu Manchu story. It was the third Fu Manchu story, and like the first two, it was made up of shorter short stories that Sax Rohmer had written for Collier's, which was a very famous and prestigious magazine. And these particular stories that were in the Sifan Mysteries were originally published in Collier's from April 8th, 1916 to June 2nd, 1917. And it was actually kind of interesting because you probably heard that and say, whoa, this took over a year for Sax Rohmer to write? Didn't he write the first two in a shorter span of time? And you are correct. He did write the first two Fu Manchu stories, or I should say, collection of stories, in a much shorter period of time. The Sifan Mysteries was kind of unusual because between the third and fourth story of the stories that make up the Sifan Mysteries, Sax Rohmer actually took a rather long hiatus between the third and fourth story. And according to my notes, it lasted from June 24th, 1916 to November 25th, 1916. So about 5 months, which was somewhat unusual, especially compared to the first two Fu Manchu books, which were done pretty promptly. Each new story came out fairly soon after the one that came before it. So this was one that was sort of interesting in the sense that it took a long time to fully release. So, but it was eventually released, and the book the stories were eventually collated and released under the title of The Sifan Mysteries in the United Kingdom in 1917. And when it was released in the United States in May 1917, it was given the alternate title The Hand of Fu Manchu. That was a common thing for the first couple of Fu Manchu books to have different names on the American side. And with the last two entries, I talked about how I debated which name I liked more than the other. And in regards to this one, the Sifan Mysteries versus the Hand of Fu Manchu, I honestly have no preference with the in regards to this one. The first two books I had titles I preferred. This one I really don't, because I think both titles are okay. Not bad, but not as interesting as the previous titles had been. So I'm going to refer to it as the Sifan Mysteries because that's the British title, and Sax Rohmer was British. So that's the one I'm going to refer it to, but it's also known as the Hand of Fu Manchu. And it's kind of interesting because at this point in his career, when Sax Rohmer was writing the Sifan Mysteries, he had gotten some attention, and Fu Manchu obviously had become a popular character, and Rohmer had done other works by this point in his career in 1917. But it's kind of interesting because the Devil Doctor, which was the last Fu Manchu book, he started the work on the Sifan mystery stories pretty much right after the Devil Doctor stories had concluded. So, in a weird way, the Devil Doctor and the Sifan mysteries are almost kind of two peas in a pod. Because since they were both short stories and collections of these short stories put together for these books, the Sifan Mysteries does very much feel like a part 2 of the Devil Doctor. So, and because they released so close together, Rohmer at this point had only released one other book between the Devil Doctor and the Sifan Mysteries, which was The Exploits of Captain O'Hagan. I don't know what it's about. I haven't heard about it. But at this point, this was the only new release between this book and the last Fu Manchu book. So, the kind of interesting thing, and William Patrick Maynard talked about this on one of his blog posts, which I'll link in the description. The blog post talking about the Sifan Mysteries. He pointed out that that even though Fu Manchu was kind of what made Sax Rohmer, it's what he made his name on, at this point in Rohmer's career, apparently he was getting kind of sick of Fu Manchu, and so kind of like William Patrick Maynard actually compares him to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and his relationship to Sherlock Holmes, because like Doyle, Rohmer kind of tried to get rid of his main character. He wanted to focus on other things, and this was in a lot of ways Rohmer was more successful than Doyle was, in the sense that Fu Manchu would not appear for another 14 years. This is the last story written in the 1910s, aside from the stage play that Sax Rohmer wrote with Fu Manchu. But for 14 years, Rohmer laid Fu Manchu to rest, and this story was, for a long time, the last true Fu Manchu book. Now, but kind of like Doyle, the Devil Doctor brought Rohmer back to him, and because Fu Manchu was just too popular. So eventually Rohmer would resurrect the character in the 1930s. But, yeah, this was technically Fu Manchu's last appearance for a very long time. So it's very interesting in that regard, seeing this era of the Devil Doctor's history come to an end. So that's a very fascinating element. But what is the plot of the Sifan Mysteries? Well, as I mentioned before, since Rohmer was writing this pretty soon after the Devil Doctor, the story actually only takes place 4 months after the end of the Devil Doctor. And a slight spoiler for those who haven't read the Devil Doctor, but at this point, Fu Manchu is considered dead. He got shot in the head at the end of the Devil Doctor, and Dr. Petrie, with Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie finally vanquishing Fu Manchu, Dr. Petrie is moving to Cairo, Egypt, and setting up a medical practice there because he wants to marry Karamana, who was Fu Manchu's slave, but who's now freed of him. So he's going to go and get married to her in Cairo. However, he's not able to really set roots yet because Nayland Smith calls him back to England. And The reason is that while Fu Manchu is supposedly dead, his criminal organization called the Sifan is not dead, because Fu Manchu, at this point in his career, he's not the head of the Sifan. He was just one of the higher members. He was one of the 7. I think that was what they said. So there's 6 other masterminds of the Sifan, and they have their own plot now in motion. And their plot is to take over the world because they're going to attempt to fulfill this ancient Tibetan prophecy about a new Empress of the world. And they find this, they're bringing in supposedly this female Tibetan who matches the description of this Empress. And they're going to do certain acts that will help them to install her into power and lead them to take over the world. And so, obviously, Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie are trying to fight this new threat. But on top of trying to stop the Sifan, they learn that maybe Fu Manchu is not as dead as they thought. And so that kind of comes into play during this battle of the Sifan. So that's the essential setup for the Sifan mysteries. So in regards to what I think really worked with the Sifan mysteries, I think the thing that really stood out to me was that there's a lot of great character development for the protagonists in here. Because in typical fashion, Nayland Smith is a bit of a hard-headed jerk, but he definitely feels a lot more amicable and not as obnoxious as he was in the first 2 books. And he actually spends a good amount of the time, not necessarily shouting at Petrie and like, oh, what are you doing, Petrie? But he's actually much more understanding and laid back compared to how he was the first 2 books. There's actually a very solid moment where Smith actually forgives Dr. Petrie for letting Fu Manchu go. And Dr. Petrie did that because he made a deal with Fu Manchu to let him go in order to get someone back. And instead of getting outrageously mad at him letting Fu Manchu go, Nayland Smith just goes, no, I understand why you did it. And he doesn't lambast Petrie like he would have done in the first 2 books. So that's kind of an interesting character development for him, where he is seemingly getting more understanding. And even Dr. Petrie has really advanced as a character, because he's not this like in over his head wishy-washy general practice physician who's like, oh, overwhelmed by everything. He actually becomes kind of an able hero in this story too, because there's one point where Nayland Smith almost gets poisoned, but Petrie is the one to stop him from getting poisoned. And as I mentioned before, he actually is the one that actually corners Fu Manchu at one point and has the doctor completely at his mercy. Fu Manchu's career might have been over if Fu Manchu hadn't made that deal. So Dr. Petrie really has advanced as a character, and it's very fun seeing him be sort of a proactive action type. I've already given it away. Yes, Fu Manchu does reappear in this story. I think most people would assume he would, given now this whole series is named after him, and after these stories, there's an entire line of books called Daughter of Fu Manchu, Mask of Fu Manchu, most people would probably assume he's still alive. So I don't think that's much of a spoiler. And one thing I actually do like about the Sifan Mysteries is that his reintroduction is actually explained in a satisfying way. Because when I finished reading The Devil Doctor, that with that big climax where he gets shot in the head, I remember right after I read that, I talked with my dad about it. I was telling my dad, oh, well, Fu Manchu's going to come back, so there's going to be some really far-fetched explanation for how he's able to survive that. We both theorized how he was going to survive it. My father suggested, oh, the bullet just, like, grazed his skull. It didn't actually, go in his head. And I was suggesting, well, he pulled some trick where he switched the gun of the person who shot him, and that what you saw hit was just like a paint ball or something that knocked him out instead of killing him. But to Sax Rohmer's credit, he actually does give an explanation about why Fu Manchu is not dead, and he does it in an interesting way. He says that, oh yeah, the bullet got Fu Manchu, and it didn't kill him, but it has paralyzed him for half his body. And he actually, one of the stories focuses around him getting emergency surgery to try and get this bullet out of his head and stop him from being fully paralyzed, because the bullet is slowly not just slowly paralyzing him, it's also messing up his mind and ruining his super intelligence. So I really respect that Rohmer didn't really cop out of the killing of Fu Manchu, because that first ending, it's like, well, that's a pretty definitive end, but this one he points out, well, no, he survived, but he has all these consequences to Fu Manchu surviving. He doesn't just reintroduce Fu Manchu and he's perfectly fine. No, through a good portion of the story, Fu Manchu has to walk with like 2 canes. He can barely hold himself alive. He needs all his henchmen to help him survive. So yeah, it's a great way of explaining his reappearance. And it doesn't stretch too much credulity, because despite what media has shown us, no, you actually can survive being shot in the head. So it's not something that strains credulity too much. And I appreciated that. And another thing I really enjoyed was that, just like the second book, this story has a very strong sense of continuity, because it's not a thing where anything that happened in the past is not really mentioned. There's a lot of callbacks to the past. Like at one point, Nayland Smith is helped out by the brother of one of Fu Manchu's victims from one of the past books. One of the killer animals that was used in the first book is present here in the grand finale. There's also the bombastic Egyptologist Sir Lionel Barton, who's been a recurring character throughout these stories, and he plays a big part in the climax too. So it really does feel like Sax Rohmer is sort of building a world where all these different people pop into the stories at different times, and previous events are referenced. So I really like that sense of continuity. There is also a new agent of Fu Manchu who is introduced here, and her name is Zarmi. And Zarmi is kind of this this mixture of a European and Asian woman who is basically this female agent of Fu Manchu, who is this horrible sadist. She loves torturing both her enemies and her followers. At one point, she puts out like cigarettes on Dr. Petrie's head, like just a total femme fatale who's a sadistic woman, and she's a fun character who pops up a lot in the story. So that was a lot of fun. She gets a lot to do, so that's kind of an interesting addition. Whereas, Karamana in the previous two books was usually more pleasant. Zarmi does not have that pleasantry. She does terrible things to both her followers and her enemies. So that's a very fun twist on Fu Manchu's servants. I also, by this point, Rohmer has codified many of Fu Manchu's death traps and deadly animals. And there's a lot of good ones here. There's one story that involves a poison flower, where if it touches you or you ingest it, it can cause death. There's also this one booby trap, which is a box that is meant to be opened and has these catches that you push on, but when you push on them, poison needles inject themselves into your thumbs. So that's a bit of a clever way of a booby trap. There's also a huge underground tunnel filled with poisonous creatures that at one point the protagonists have to get through. That's a lot of fun. There's also at one point a character is drugged with a specific drug that makes them hallucinate somebody is Fu Manchu and cause them to shoot this Fu Manchu, but it's a fake. It's actually someone else. And so that's kind of an interesting twist. The idea of sort of drugging someone to be your assassin predates the Manchurian Candidate by several decades, so that's very cool. I also liked a lot of the environments in this one. Sax Rohmer does repeat a lot of the environments that he had set up in previous Fu Manchu stories. But there's some ones here that are pretty good and unique. There's this one where there's this artist cafe that's right in the heart of London. It's where all the posh and hoity-toity artists go to have coffee and tea. But in the back, there's a hashish den filled with all the sin and inequity you can think of. And that's a fun location. And there's a very good action scene there where a fire starts and the protagonists are kind of stuck in a situation where they cannot easily escape. So that's very cool. There's also this back alley surgeon's operating room, and this is where a particularly important plot element happens. And there's also a finale that involves like this ancient British nobleman's estate that has these towers and dungeons, and the grounds are crawling with like wild animals. So there's a lot of great environments in this story. And actually that finale involving that estate with the wild animals, it's a great climax because not only are there wild animals, this estate also has a satanic chapel underground. And it's and all this stuff with the wild animals and the satanic chapel, it's all happening in the middle of a huge storm. So it's a very good climactic environment for this finale. So that was quite memorable. This is also the story that is the first appearance of Fu Manchu's daughter, who will later be called Fa Lo Sui, but here she's not named. It's just mentioned that she's Fu Manchu's daughter, and she doesn't have a whole lot to do in this story. She only appears in like the final, I would say, third of the story. And but we really get to see this interesting perception of her, because Dr. Petrie's the only one who really gets a good look at her, and it reveals how much power she holds over men. And there's kind of this interesting moment where she and Dr. Petrie are alone, and one of the things that is said, because Fa Lo Sui is posing as the Empress of the world, because she's posing as that individual to confuse the Si-Fan higher-ups that she's the Empress of the world, and that's Fu Manchu's way of getting full control of the Si-Fan. And while she's posing as the Empress of the world, Fa Lo Sui can't show her face. That's one of the things the Si-Fan group believes. If you see the Empress's face, you have to die. But you get this kind of interesting moment where Fa Lo Sui, when no one else is around, actually shows her face to Dr. Petrie. She lifts her veil. And it's kind of described as an interesting moment where you're not quite sure, is she doing this in the hopes of condemning Dr. Petrie to death, or is it like her strange, odd way of like showing some respect to Dr. Petrie, much like how Fu Manchu respects Dr. Petrie. And it's kind of left ambiguous, but it's a very interesting introduction to this character who's going to be much more important in later stories. And I mentioned the Si-Fan earlier. This one thing I really enjoyed is that we get introduced to other members of the Si-Fan. The one we get the most time with is Kai Ming. And Kai Ming is another Chinese member of the Si-Fan. And while the story tries to frame as if, oh yeah, they're all in cahoots with Fu Manchu, it's actually left kind of ambiguous how much Kai Ming and the other Si-Fans are fully gelling with Fu Manchu. Because they do some things that are meant to strike at Nayland Smith and are clearly to the benefit of Fu Manchu. But they also the story is also kind of ambiguous about how much they buy into the Empress of the world concept, and whether they think it's more of a tool for usage to gain power than like earnestly believing it. And there's even some suggestions that they're kind of aware Fu Manchu is trying to play them with this Empress of the world stuff. But again, it's kind of ambiguous. You're not entirely sure whether they fully buy into the Empress of the world element, or if they're aware Fu Manchu is trying to play them. It's ambiguous, which I think is a good way to do it, because you can form a sort of an interesting undercurrent about how perhaps the other members of the Si-Fan feel about Fu Manchu. Because remember, Fu Manchu is not the head honcho of Si-Fan yet. He's just one of their higher members. So that's kind of interesting, the idea of inner politics between the different Si-Fan members, them trying to sort of outmatch each other. So that was very cool to see. I now want to talk about what I think didn't work with this story. And I was kind of surprised to find that there was actually a lot in this Fu Manchu adventure that I really didn't care for. Which is weird because I just said a lot of things I really enjoyed, but there were a couple of things that I thought sort of dragged down this book, especially in comparison to the first two books. This book shares a problem, and this was the first one I really noticed. This book really shares a problem with the Devil Doctor in that I don't think it uses Karamana to her best potential. Because in the first Fu Manchu collection, Karamana was a very proactive character. She was trying to rescue someone she loved, and she was playing Dr. Petrie and Nayland Smith against Fu Manchu, and hiding her attempts to undermine Fu Manchu through clever manipulations. And the second book I thought didn't do as good a job because they essentially took away her agency. And that's something that I think happens here. Her agency is taken away yet again. In this case, Karamana is basically turned into a damsel in distress. She's captured by Fu Manchu's agents at one point, and she's basically used as a bargaining chip to make sure Dr. Petrie doesn't get too close. And because of that, she doesn't get a moment where she manages to escape. She doesn't really get a moment where she manages to manipulate Fu Manchu. She just gets captured, and even after she's released, she gets captured again. So it's just kind of frustrating that first Fu Manchu story had a very cool, love interest for Dr. Petrie, who had her own goals and her own agency. And in these last two books, she just really hasn't had as much to do as a character. She's kind of been shunted to the side, which I think is a real shame because she was one of the more interesting aspects of the first book. I also think that the story kind of loses focus at a certain point because for the first, I would say about third of the book, it has a very cohesive focus because the main focus is this mysterious box that one of Nayland Smith's contacts have given him. And it's a box that supposedly controls the destiny of the Empress of the world. It has something regarding her with that. And that box is a major focus for the first three stories that make up the collection. But the problem is, at a certain point, the box gets stolen, and thus Nayland Smith doesn't have it as a bargaining chip. And after that, the story kind of becomes disjointed. The stories feel very discordant. They don't feel entirely like they connect to one another. They're always sort of separate events that happen several days or even weeks between each other. And it was kind of the same problem I had with the very first Fu Manchu story, the insidious Dr. Fu Manchu, because that was kind of the same setup where Sax Rohmer wrote all these short stories that took place at different times and didn't firmly connect to each other, and then kind of put them in this one book, and it felt very sporadic. The stories sort of felt episodic, but not just episodic, but random. None of them really connected to each other. So I thought the second book did a much better job of connecting each singular story to one another. But this third one kind of feels like it falls back to the first one's problems of that sporadic storytelling. And so this kind of felt like a regression from the advancements in plotting that the second book had set up. This one felt like it fell back to the first story's method of, okay, do stories, but don't make them connect very well. So that was kind of frustrating, especially frustrating because that first third actually did connect fairly well when it had this focus on the box. But once the box is gone, yeah, it kind of falls into a random events. You can choose which one you want to do. So it gets a little better towards the end, but it still feels a little discordant. One thing that really annoyed me, and I wrote this down, is that a lot of the stories start in media res, which, for those that don't know, means in the middle of the action. It's opening not the beginning of the story, but in the middle of things going on. And this was very frustrating because there were many points where details that would have been really helpful to know at the beginning to set up these stories, they're not mentioned until several pages into these adventures, which made things very, very confusing. I was not... There were times where I'm going, well, wait, why are you doing this? Shouldn't you be there? Oh, no, actually, you were here. You just didn't tell me you were here. And that's probably why the plotting felt so discordant, because a lot of these stories would just end and then start somewhere else and not tell you how they got there. So the in media res thing really bothered me this time around. It was very confusing. I've been talking about the first two Fu Manchu books a lot during this review, and that's actually one of my main criticisms, because the story this time around does very much feel like it's repeating the first and second collections at a lot of points, because the first and second ones used a lot of haunted houses. And this one, the finale, is a big haunted house with the satanic chapel underneath. And then you have like all these hidden hideaways that hold like dens of inequity in these seemingly normal environments. And again, that was something used frequently in the first and second books, and it starts feeling a little played out here. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a dive bar down by the Thames River. I guess Fu Manchu's in there. And like I said, there are some that I'm like, okay, that's a little creative, like the Artist Cafe. But on the whole, it kind of feels like at this point, Rohmer is just kind of going, okay, what did I write originally? Let me go back to those first two books. Okay, I found this. I like that. Let me use it again. And it didn't... There were some elements in the second book that repeated the first book, but it didn't bother me as much there because it very much... There was a lot of other things that felt like Rohmer was advancing the tale in terms of plot and characterization. Here, he does advance plot and characterization, but I don't think he advances it enough to where I was able to overlook this repetition. Because this kind of felt like, okay, we've got to go to the dive bar, we got to go to the haunted house, we got to go to the river. So, yeah, this one just sort of felt weirdly repetitive, in a way that I didn't think the first or second books were. And like I said earlier, Rohmer allegedly was getting kind of tired of Fu Manchu at this point, according to William Patrick Maynard. And that may be why this book kind of feels a little underwhelming in terms of the creativity. I think maybe Rohmer just didn't have much more he could think of with Fu Manchu at this point, and he just reused a lot of concepts. It wouldn't surprise me, because this does kind of feel... There are some parts here where it does kind of feel like we're going through the motions of what a Fu Manchu story should do. So, I don't know. It doesn't surprise me that Rohmer was getting tired of Fu Manchu, because this does kind of seem like the writing of someone who is kind of getting tired of a character. And also, he started writing the Sifon mystery stories like pretty quickly right after the Devil Doctor ones. So, yeah, maybe it was just a thing where he didn't have as much time to think of new ideas compared to what he did with the first and the second one. I don't know, but this one didn't feel as creative in a certain respect. I also thought that Fu Manchu's end, his supposed end, in this story, was kind of lackluster, because during that climactic storm, slight spoiler, but Fu Manchu foolishly goes out to sea and dies in a shipwreck, supposedly. And he doesn't have like a face-to-face meeting with Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie in the climax like he did in the last book. And I really disliked that, because that second book, Fu Manchu's end, felt very earned. Like, he was at his most sadistic in that book, where he was like forcing Nayland Smith to be eaten by rats, and the only mercy he can get is if Dr. Petrie cuts his head off with a samurai sword. Like, it was so insanely brutal and sadistic that it was kind of like, okay, that's a memorable end, and it makes his supposed death by headshot feel very earned. Like, he was a sadistic dude who deserved that. But here, we got this great climax in a satanic chapel, but Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie never see Fu Manchu in it doing the insane acts. He's already gone. They chase him to a ship, but the ship gets shipwrecked in the middle of this huge storm. And of course they never find a body, because of course you never do. But because of that, there's always this distance between Smith and Petrie and Fu Manchu, and thus you never really get that sense of that personal enmity they all have for each other. And it's just kind of the thing of like, okay, we need a ambiguous ending for Fu Manchu, shipwreck in the middle of a storm. Like I said, it feels like a shrug. It's like, okay, I need, like, Rohmer's smart enough to leave an open door in case he wants to bring Fu Manchu back, but it's not really a memorable end. It's just kind of like, all right, it's a big climax set in the storm. I guess the sea takes care of him. Again, it feels perfunctory. That's the word. Like, okay, there's got to be an end. Here's an end. So I really didn't like that ending, especially compared to the great ending of the Devil Doctor. So that was a real bummer for me. So final ranking. This was kind of a hard one to figure out, because the last two books I gave 4 stars out of 5. For those that don't know, I grade on a 5-star system, 0 out of 5 being the worst, 5 out of 5 being the best. And I like the first 2 Fu Manchu books enough to give them 4 out of 5 stars. This is one where I really hesitated with deciding my final score, because there were a lot of things I liked about it, but this was the first one in a while where I really felt like there were problems. And significant problems that dragged down my enjoyment of the book. And I can't call the book bad by any sense of the word, but I did sort of think about it and go, I don't like these as much as the first 2 books. I think the Siphon Mysteries is a bit of a step down. So I am going to rank this book 3 out of 5 stars, which in my verbiage is a pleasantly average book. It's not a bad book by any means, but it's average. It's one that is more good than it's bad, but it's a very average read. Because while I think the story does add some neat elements, like adding onto the ideas of the Siphon group and a lot of great set pieces, like that Satanic Chapel and that Artist Cafe. Those are very strong. But like I said earlier, it feels like a step backwards from the second book. Like, the second book felt like it was advancing the first book's setup and sort of fixing the issues the first book had. This one does not. It kind of feels more like it's falling back to the first book's flaws and foibles. In some ways being worse than the first book, because like I said, Karamana just doesn't get anything really to do here, despite being a very important character in the first book. So, yeah, this story kind of felt like a step backward from where the insidious Dr. Fu Manchu started and the Devil Doctor progressed. This feels very much like it's not progressing the story of Fu Manchu in a way that it feels like it's a better story. Yeah, so this was one that I saw a lot more flaws to than the previous 2 books, and it did affect my enjoyment. Would I recommend it? I think I would recommend for Fu Manchu fans, because I think there is a lot of cool individual moments in here, like that Artist Cafe and that climax. But I'm not sure anybody else would enjoy it as much as Fu Manchu or Sax Rohmer fans would. So, any inspiration? For those that don't know, I'm a working writer, and one of the things I like doing when I do these reviews is talking about whether they've inspired me in any way for any story concepts of my own. Like I said, those 2 set pieces of the Artist Cafe that holds the hashish bar in the back and the Satanic Chapel under this mansion, those are 2 concepts I really like. I like the idea of like this artist gathering that's meant for artists to gather actually holds this very sinister purpose that is not readily noticeable. And I just like the idea of a secret satanic temple under a house, because that's just a kind of an interesting concept. So, yeah, so those ideas I think are very cool, and I could probably make something of those. So that is all I have to say about the Sifan mysteries. And that's probably all I'm going to say about Fu Manchu for a little while, because I'm going to take a break from Fu Manchu just for a little bit, because partially because since the next Fu Manchu story did not appear until 14 years later, I kind of wanted to sit on it for a while to sort of reflect that feeling a lot of readers had, where there was this long gap where Fu Manchu did not appear, but and sort of get into that mindset of someone you haven't seen for a while suddenly coming back. So that's one reason I'm doing that. But I'm also doing it because I wanted to check out some of Rohmer's other works in the 1910s as well as the 1920s. Because aside from a stage play that Rohmer wrote with Fu Manchu in 1919, he didn't do any other Fu Manchu stuff between the Sifan Mysteries and Daughter of Fu Manchu in 1931. So I really wanted to look at a lot of Rohmer's 1910s work as well as his 1920s work to sort of see what he was doing during this period where Fu Manchu did not have his main attention. So, and some people have actually told me that they think the 1920s was Rohmer's best period in terms of creativity and the different kind of stories he wrote. So I do want to check that out and see if I agree with that assessment. Another big thing is that I've said before that I'm going to go to Pulp Fest this month, and William Patrick Maynard is actually going to be there, and supposedly he has a couple of Fu Manchu books that are going to be there. Original Fu Manchu books done by himself, not by SAX ROHMER, but ones that had been approved of by the SAX ROHMER estate. So that's going to be very cool to read, and I'm definitely going to try and get those while I'm there. So, yeah, this is going to be probably the last Fu Manchu you're going to see for probably 2 to 3 months, but there will be other SAX ROHMER stories popping up soon. So, please stay alert for that, and I hope I can show you guys some cool new SAX ROHMER books in the near future. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Bye.